In my life, I've read over 400 fantasy books covering over 80 different series, and these are my top 10 best completed series. If you don't see a series on this list, there's a good chance that I liked it and it just didn't make the cut, but feel free to flame me in the comments or in my Discord, which is the best, fastest growing adult fantasy Discord around. So check the description down to join that Discord. So I'm only picking series here that I've finished. There are series here like the Dandelion Dynasty that will almost assuredly be on this list next year, but I haven't finished it yet, so it stays off. Alright, so let's start with this list with number 10, and it is The Wheel of Time. This is by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. Last year this was at number 5, and this is the biggest falling of the entire group here. It's falling in part because I read it early on in my fantasy career, and I've just read a lot of stuff that I like more than that. I still really like the series. It's good. Tons of you know about this because it's very famous, especially because of the hit Amazon show. I don't know if it's a hit, but very well-funded Amazon show. But this is just classic fantasy, awesome world building, really, really good stuff. Rather slow at times. It's got a slog right in the middle for a few books. But a really enjoyable series, and there's a reason that so many people think of this as their number 1 series of all time, because of how iconic it is. Number 9 is Mother of Learning. This is by 𝐬𝐫𝐫𝐬𝐿 𝐬𝐫𝐬𝐿. And last year this was not on the list. This is a new read for me. This is a formerly web serial that has now been converted into books, but don't be put off by the web serial thing because there's a lot of really good web serials out there that are just as good as many fantasy books, and this is one of the best of them. It's an amazing time loop story, so think of like fantasy Groundhog's Day with wizards, and that's what this is. There's an enormous mystery going on about it, about why are we in a time loop, how do we get out of the time loop, and how do we stop these horrible events that have been happening, because we don't want to get out of the time loop without solving this major problem. So there's all these competing things going on, this major mystery happening, a lot of fun action, and really, really awesome progression, fantasy mechanics going along with these wizards. Number 8 is Mistborn Era 1. Last year, this is number 7, so it's dropped a little bit, but not much. And this is by Brandon Sanderson. And I love Mistborn Era 1. And even though this is slowly dropping off this list, a couple years ago, if I would have made a video like this, it would have been like number 2 or 3. But I will always look fondly upon Mistborn Era 1. Not so much Mistborn Era 2. I don't really like that one at all. But Mistborn Era 1 is just, from beginning to end, thoroughly enjoyable. Now, I'm a big adult fantasy reader. And this blends the line a little bit between YA and adult, but it's got a lot of adult themes to it. Just a really, really fun, action-packed, with great magic system, an incredible, incredible ending that even though this is a little bit lower on my list, I still think of it as one of the greatest fantasy endings of all time, and some of the best, well-thought-out twists throughout the series that I will ever read in my life. Number 7 is The Bone Ships. This is by R.J. Barker, and last year this was not on the list. I read this recently. This is a trilogy, and I gave a 5-star rating to all 3 books in this trilogy. I was just blown away by how good this was and how criminally underrated the series is. Now, there's a decent chance you've heard of this, but I bet you haven't read it because not a ton of people have. But it's absolutely wonderful. I mean, the first book is admittedly rather slow, but by the end of that first book, the action does not let off the gas. It's a really fun seafaring story involving like these mythical like water dragons that they're trying to hunt or save or both. And all of these, relationships going on between the ship captain and the crew, the different world powers here that are vying for control of these dragon ships, and the bones from these dragons that they convert into ships. Very inventive, amazing writing, and R.J. Barker is an immensely talented writer. Number 6 is one that I think you'll find on most lists nowadays because it's so popular, and that is the Greenbone Saga. This is by Fonda Lee. Last year this was not on the list, and again, this is a trilogy that I gave 5 stars to every single book in this series. I'm just in love with this. This is like an Asian fantasy Godfather story, and I'm a sucker for this because I am obsessed with The Godfather. It's my favorite movie, maybe two of my favorite movies of all time, with number 1 and number 2. And this just takes it in a different direction. I mean, it starts off feeling very, very similar to The Godfather, but it takes it in these different fantasy elements with this Asian background to it. Very amazing twists and turns throughout. In an amazing way. It does it like multi-generationally. It has these, especially in the last book, these big time jumps. So you get this more epic scale to the story and how it's impacted this family with generations to come. Number 5 is The 5 Warrior Angels. This is by Brian Lee Durfee. This is a trilogy that just got completed recently. And again, last year this was not on my list. And this is the most underrated series of all time. It just needs more attention. This is an amazing, epic, grim, dark story. This is very dark. It's not like the darkest story I've ever read, but it's up there. And just amazing, epic fantasy in the A Song of Ice and Fire type of way, where you have lots of different powers that are fighting for leadership here, but on almost a grander scale, because you have, two major factions in the world that are like clashing against each other. It's the best take on fantasy religion that I've ever read, and that everyone kind of believes in some core tenets of this religion, but it's split off and created these major churches that are at war with each other, and you don't know what's right or what's wrong, or if anything is right or anything is wrong. It's amazing, fun, and it's a must-read for any fantasy fan. Number 4 is The Realm of the Elderlings. This is by Robin Hobb. Last year, this was number 4 also, so it's staying true here at number 4. And yeah, this is a 16-book series that kind of twists and turns in terms of what story it's telling. In terms, a little bit in the Malazan way, where you'll have a story in one part of the world and another one over here, but they all kind of blend together in the end. This is, in general, the story of 𝐿𝑒chivalry Farseer, this bastard boy who grows up trying to find his way in the world. This is very famous for having an incredibly large amount of tearjerker moments. You will be cheering for these characters, this main character especially, as he grows up from a little boy to an old man at the end of it. Tons of amazing fantasy elements here, and some of the best writing that you're ever going to find. The prose is just incredible. I mean, Robin Hobb could write a story with nothing happening, and I would still be engrossed. And so to find a story where a lot happens, it's truly, truly wonderful. Number 3 is The Banished Lands. Now, I'm considering the series of The Faithful and the Fallen and of Blood and Bone within the same series here, because it talks about the exact same world and a lot of the same characters, and this is by John Gwynne. Last year, this was number 2, and it dropped down 1 place, and yeah, it's just, this is awesome. It doesn't like blow my mind in the sense that it didn't do anything really crazy new, but it did everything that I've loved about fantasy and just kind of perfected it. It's an awesome epic fantasy journey quest with some amazing religious elements of it, with this hero aspect of, the chosen one or multiple chosen ones for both good and evil. And it's just wonderful. I mean, John Gwynne is a master at writing, especially these battle sequences that he writes are just to die for. I don't think anybody in the fantasy genre, including the person I'm going to talk about next, is as good as John Gwynne when it comes to writing engaging battle sequences. And that brings us to number 2. And number 2 is The First Law. This is by Joe Abercrombie. This is the First Law trilogy, 3 standalones, and the Age of Madness trilogy, all wrapped up into this greater world here. Last year, this was number 3. And why did it move from one spot? Because it's not a new series that I've read. And it's because I just kind of thought about it more, and I fell in love with it more the longer I think about it. And I just, it's captivated me. I'm actually rereading it again now because I just can't stop thinking about it. This is an amazing, grim, dark story, another epic fantasy type of story, but the writing here is just sublime. And if there's one thing that makes this series stand out from the others, it's the character writing. There are a large handful of characters that are some of the best that you're ever going to find in the fantasy genre. The plot is a little bit slow throughout the series. It picks up a lot, especially in that second trilogy and the standalones. But that first book and a little bit of the second one are a little bit slower pacing, but it's very much worth it. And you got to check this out if you can handle a grim, dark story, if you want some good characters. And that brings us to number 1, and if you watch my channel, you already know what it is. It's 𝐒𝐿azin, Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. Last year was number 1. The year before that I was number 1. And I project that next year it's going to be number 1 as well. It's the most in-depth fantasy story that's ever been told. It's got literally hundreds of point of views, like 1,000 named characters. It's like the most complex thing you're ever going to read, and that you almost need like a companion guide to make sense of what's going on. But the prose is amazing. The way these stories weave in with each other is just, without a doubt the greatest thing that I've ever read. If you get hooked into this, then there's a reason so many people, and whenever I do videos like this with content creators, that the series almost always has the most people saying it's their favorite. It's not critically acclaimed for the favorite because it does have a high barrier of entry for some people. It's a little, it comes off more intimidating than I think it deserves because you can follow along, but it's hard, it's fun, it's worth it. So I know that's a rapid, fast video, but I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you stuck through it to the end. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all of my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, Ben, Brian, CJ, Darren, Jonathan, My Book is Lit, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Anna, Andra, Angelo, Ben, Blair, Brock, Evan, Fanixan, Jamie, Jeff Pixler, Maria, Michael Sugarman, Sky, and Zion.